In the highest echelons of the global wine industry, people think winemaking is a romantic, leisurely art. They picture sun-drenched vineyards, rich aristocrats swirling glasses on patios, and poetry written about the notes of cherry and leather. But true enologists know the dark, dirty reality. Winemaking is not poetry. It is a brutal, unforgiving, microscopic war. You are trying to command the exact behavior of billions of living, breathing yeast cells. You are fighting against temperature, humidity, and time. A single rogue strain of wild bacteria, a temperature fluctuation of 2 degrees, or a fraction of a percent of unwanted oxygen, and a masterpiece that took 10 years to grow instantly turns into 1 million gallons of worthless, foul-smelling vinegar. I spent my entire life learning how to control the volatile, living chemistry inside those barrels. I just never realized that the most toxic, unsalvageable contamination in my life was slowly fermenting right inside my own marriage. My name is Dominic. I'm 38 years old, and I am a master enologist and viticulturist. 7 years ago, I married Victoria. Victoria was an elite, high society sommelier and public relations director for the luxury hospitality sector. She thrived in the glamorous, champagne-soaked world of Michelin star restaurants, exclusive tasting rooms, and billionaire wine collectors. I was the introverted farmer and scientist who spent 14 hours a day with soil under my fingernails and hands stained purple from grape skins. We were opposites, but I thought we were the perfect blend. I grew the masterpiece in the dark, and she sold it in the light. For the last 8 years, I poured every ounce of my personal savings, my sanity, and my genius into my absolute magnum opus. I called it Project Nectar. It wasn't just a good wine, it was a biological miracle. Through years of cross-pollinating a nearly extinct pre-phylloxera grape varietal and cultivating a completely proprietary strain of fermentation yeast, I had produced 10 flawless French oak barrels of Cabernet. It was complex, ethereal, and absolutely perfect. Master sommeliers who tasted the raw barrel samples guaranteed it would score a perfect 100 points. The entire 10-barrel vintage was conservatively appraised at $20 million. I promised Victoria this vintage was our empire. I told her that when we finally bottled and released it, we would be culinary royalty. She would never have to hustle for a commission again. But Victoria didn't want to wait for the final maturation. She looked at my dirt-stained boots, the endless nights I spent in the freezing cellar, and she decided she wanted the $20 million without having to endure the farmer. And she found a corporate shark who was more than willing to help her drain my barrels.
The decay in our marriage accelerated the moment Victoria's PR agency was contracted by a massive global wine conglomerate. The CEO of that syndicate was a man named Laurent. Laurent was 45 years old and the absolute poster boy for corporate culinary greed. He wasn't a winemaker. He couldn't tell the difference between a rare Bordeaux and cheap grape juice if the labels were removed. He was a ruthless venture capitalist who bought up massive industrial vineyards, pumped the grapes full of artificial additives and sugar, slapped a gold foil label on the bottle, and charged naive rich people a 500% premium for the luxury brand. He wore custom velvet blazers, flew on a private Gulfstream jet, and treated brilliant working-class farmers like disposable, ignorant peasants. Suddenly, Victoria was spending all her time at Laurent's glass tower headquarters in Napa Valley, claiming she was advising him on a massive new luxury supply chain. The red flags didn't just quietly appear, they smelled like sulfur in a clean room. First, the profound, unapologetic disrespect. Victoria started actively belittling my scientific process. "Dominic, you need to wake up," she scoffed one evening, tossing her $4,000 designer handbag onto my tasting table. "Laurent manages a $500 million portfolio. He controls the market. You're just a guy playing in a dark cave with rotten grape juice. You lack corporate vision. Nobody cares about your microbiological purity. They care about the label on the glass." Second, the intense, unnatural secrecy regarding her devices. Victoria changed the passcode on her phone and her laptop. She started taking crisis logistics calls in her car, sitting in the driveway with the engine running for 40 minutes before coming inside. Third, and by far the most terrifying, was her sudden, highly specific interest in the security of my subterranean wine cave. Victoria, a woman who absolutely loathed the damp cold of the cellar, suddenly asked me exactly how the massive climate control systems worked and where I kept the physical, notarized ownership documents for the 10 master barrels. When a luxury sommelier suddenly cares about the physical location of unbottled multi-million-dollar biological assets, you don't answer the question, you check the barrels for a leak.
When you have a biological asset worth $20 million resting unprotected in wooden barrels, you don't just rely on a padlock. My entire subterranean wine cave was routed through a custom telemetry mainframe. It monitored temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. But to ensure absolute security, the system also utilized highly sensitive acoustic sensors that listened for the sound of moving liquid or opening doors. One Saturday night, while Victoria was supposedly at a weekend hospitality retreat in the sea, my phone vibrated with a critical priority alert from the cellar. I pulled my truck into an empty parking lot, opened my secure server app, and tapped into the live acoustic feed. I didn't just find an affair. I found a premeditated, multi-million-dollar act of corporate espionage and grand larceny. I heard footsteps echoing on the gravel floor of my sanctuary. It was Victoria and Laurent. Because the cave was dead quiet, the highly sensitive microphone picked up their conversation with crystal clarity. Laurent was tapping the side of my priceless French oak barrels, his voice shaking with greed. "This is it, Victoria. This is the Holy Grail. The Global Oenophile Gala in Napa is next weekend. If I bottle this under my flagship label and serve it to the European critics, I will secure a $100 million global distribution monopoly overnight. They will crown me the king of wine. Are the transport trucks ready?" Victoria laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made the blood freeze in my veins. "Yes, next Friday, Dominic is flying to an agricultural seminar in Oregon. While he's gone, you bring your climate-controlled trucks. We load all 10 barrels. Before we leave, I'll manually shut off the cooling compressors and turn the commercial heaters on maximum. The cave will hit 100 degrees in hours. We'll tell him a catastrophic power failure cooked the wine and turned it to vinegar. He'll be completely devastated." Laurent kissed her neck, and the divorce. "The papers are already drafted," Victoria sneered. "He poured all our savings into these barrels. He's completely bankrupt. He won't have the money to fight your corporate lawyers. We take the $20 million vintage and I'll be living in your penthouse by the end of the month. He's just a naive grape stomper, Laurent." I sat alone in the sweltering cab of my truck, staring at the glowing monitor as my entire reality shattered. My wife of 7 years was sleeping with a corporate parasite. Together, they were actively plotting to steal 8 years of my blood, sweat, and genius, intentionally destroy my remaining life's work by cooking my cellar, debut my masterpiece to billionaires, and leave me utterly destroyed and destitute. If you want to destroy a rival winemaker, you don't smash his bottles. You let him build a beautiful tasting room, seat the harshest critics in the world, and then you quietly let the chemistry do its job. I didn't confront her. If I did, Laurent's army of corporate lawyers would bury me in injunctions, claim Victoria was a legal partner in my business, and tie the wine up in court for a decade while it aged into dust. I needed them to steal the barrels. I needed Laurent to proudly pour my creation for the most elite, ruthless wine critics on the planet. So I went to work on the cellular level. That night, while Victoria was fast asleep, I went into the wine cave. Working with absolute agonizing precision, I carefully extracted the real, priceless Project Nectar wine from the 10 barrels. I pumped the glorious ruby red liquid into sterile stainless steel transport vats and quietly moved them to a highly secure, private, climate-controlled vault across the state. Then I turned my attention to the empty barrels. I filled them with a completely standard, decent-tasting, commercially available Cabernet. To the naked eye, and even to a corporate CEO like Laurent, it looked and tasted absolutely fine. It smelled like standard luxury wine. But I am a master of microbiology. I didn't just leave it at that. I introduced a highly specific, genetically modified, dormant strain of Brettanomyces yeast, combined with a volatile sulfur compound, into the barrels. I essentially programmed a biological logic bomb. I genetically conditioned the yeast to react violently to two specific, unavoidable environmental catalysts: heavy aeration, oxygenation from being poured into a decanter or swirled in a glass, and a precise ambient temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit, the exact temperature of a luxury dining room. When sealed inside the barrel or a corked bottle, the wine was completely stable and tasted fine. But exactly 3 minutes after being poured into a glass and exposed to oxygen, the dormant yeast would violently activate. The rapid oxidation would cause the beautiful deep red wine to instantly turn a horrific, sludgy swamp green color. It would rapidly foam up, bubbling uncontrollably like a toxic science experiment. And most importantly, it would release a massive, overpowering stench of rotting eggs, sulfur, and raw sewage. I placed the booby-trapped barrels exactly where the master barrels used to be. I kissed Victoria goodbye on Thursday morning. "Have a good weekend, Victoria," I said smoothly. "I'll be in Oregon until Sunday. Please keep an eye on the cellar." "Of course, baby," she lied, giving me a sweet, empty smile. "Travel safe." I let her bring the thieves onto my land. I let them steal the bomb. Now, they just had to pull the cork.
I didn't fly to Oregon. I drove straight to the downtown offices of an attorney specializing in federal agricultural law and the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, TTB. I handed my lawyer my original time-stamped chemical logs, the official federal patent applications for the unique grape DNA, and the crystal-clear acoustic recordings of Victoria and Laurent explicitly conspiring to steal the barrels and sabotage my cellar with commercial heaters. "Dominic," my lawyer said, looking at the messages, "stealing a $20 million agricultural asset and bottling it under a fraudulent commercial label is a massive federal felony. It violates massive TTB and FDA regulations. It is international fraud." We immediately filed a preemptive, highly classified registration of the true wine DNA with the federal authorities, locking the legal ownership entirely under my LLC. Then we waited. Through the hidden security cameras I had secretly rewired in my cellar, I watched the heist happen live. On Friday night, Laurent's unmarked climate-controlled trucks backed up to my loading dock. I watched my wife happily direct men to load my booby-trapped barrels into the trucks. Before they left, true to her word, I watched Victoria walk over to the climate control panel. She shut off the cooling compressors and cranked the industrial heaters to maximum, intentionally trying to destroy any remaining wine in my sanctuary to cover her tracks. They drove away, thinking they had just pulled off the perfect crime. They had no idea they were transporting biological dynamite to Napa Valley.
Saturday night, the Global Oenophile Gala in Napa Valley, the undisputed center of the elite wine universe. I wasn't in the room, but the global live stream and the subsequent international news reports documented the entire glorious execution. Laurent stood proudly on the main stage. The room was packed with mega-wealthy investors, celebrity chefs, and hundreds of aggressive wine critics. Victoria was standing in the VIP front row, looking incredibly proud, waiting for her $20 million payday. "Ladies and gentlemen," Laurent announced, his voice oozing with arrogance. "For years, my corporate laboratories have worked to perfect the ultimate vintage. Tonight, I present a wine that will redefine history." He dramatically pulled the cork on a beautifully branded, massive Magnum bottle. The crowd applauded. Waiters moved swiftly through the room, pouring generous glasses of the deep, beautiful red wine for the 500 elite guests. Laurent raised his own crystal glass, swirling the wine expertly to aerate it. The critics did the same. I looked at the clock on my screen. I knew the biology. 1 minute, 2 minutes. At exactly the 3-minute mark of oxygen exposure, the hyper-oxidizing yeast hit critical mass. The biological bomb detonated. On the live global broadcast, right in front of the most ruthless critics on Earth, the magic violently died. The beautiful, glowing ruby red wine in every single glass in the room suddenly flickered, turning a sickly, toxic swamp green color. The billionaire investors frowned, stopping mid-toast. The cellular structure of the wine completely collapsed. It didn't just change color. The liquid began to violently, aggressively foam. With a loud, audible hiss, thick, green, sludgy bubbles erupted from the glasses, overflowing onto the pristine white tablecloths and splattering onto the expensive suits of the guests. But the foam was just the visual. The chemical reaction released the volatile sulfur compounds. A massive, overwhelming, unimaginably foul stench of rotting eggs, raw sewage, and sulfur instantly flooded the entire ballroom. The elite crowd screamed in sheer, unadulterated horror. A famous French wine critic physically dropped his glass, gagging violently, covering his mouth as he scrambled away from the table. "What the hell is happening?" Laurent screamed at his sommeliers, his face pale, totally unhinged, looking around the room in absolute panic as the green foam spilled over his own hands. The investors erupted into chaos. "It's rotting! It smells like raw sewage! You served us toxic waste!" Victoria dropped her glass. It shattered on the marble floor. She put her hands over her mouth, her face turning the color of wet concrete, looking like she was going to pass out. Before Laurent's security could even attempt to calm the crowd, the heavy doors of the tasting room burst open. Agents from the FDA, the TTB, and local authorities marched directly through the fleeing, coughing crowd, badges flashing. I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of my coffee, smiled at the chaotic, screaming live stream, and closed my laptop. You cannot unexplode a rotting, green, sulfuric biohazard onto the tables of 500 billionaires on a live broadcast. The fallout was an absolute, unmitigated corporate massacre. Laurent was arrested on the spot for massive corporate fraud, violating federal food and beverage safety laws, and attempting to sell unvetted toxic substances. Because the foul-smelling sludge had ruined the venue and caused a massive panic, he was hit with millions of dollars in civil lawsuits from the event organizers and the furious investors. When the federal authorities raided his corporate headquarters, they found the stolen data. Laurent's entire $500 million empire completely collapsed. His investors pulled their funding immediately. He was ousted as CEO, his winery was shut down by the FDA, and he was facing a decade in federal prison. Victoria's life was vaporized. Laurent, realizing he was facing international prison time, immediately threw her to the wolves, telling investigators that she was a rogue sommelier who had supplied him with the stolen, toxic wine without his knowledge. She was arrested by federal agents the moment she tried to leave the venue. She called me from a federal holding cell, sobbing so hard she was hyperventilating. Dominic, please. The feds arrested me. Laurent dumped me. The wine turned into rotting green sludge. You have to tell them you made a mistake with the fermentation. Please, I have nothing." "I didn't make a mistake, Victoria," I said calmly, leaning back against my tasting table. "I gave you exactly what you stole. You just forgot to do your biological stress tests. I have the video of you trying to cook my cellar with the heaters, by the way. I hope you enjoy the fluorescent lights in federal court." I hung up and blocked her number. During our divorce settlement, she had absolute zero leverage. Because she was a federally indicted felon facing charges for conspiring to steal a $20 million marital asset and intentionally destroying property, the judge showed zero mercy. He awarded me 100% of our marital assets, the house, and my entire wine cave. She walked away with massive legal debt and a permanently ruined life.
It's been almost 3 years since that gala in Napa Valley. A month after the arrests, I retrieved the real, flawless barrels of Project Nectar from the secure vault. Working in absolute peace, I officially launched the vintage. It was perfect. I sold the exclusive distribution rights to a highly respected, ethical wine consortium in Bordeaux for $24 million. I paid off all my debts, bought a massive new commercial vineyard and research facility, and I now craft bespoke vintages purely for the love of the science. I never have to answer to a corporate boss or worry about funding ever again. Last I heard, Victoria avoided a long prison sentence by taking a plea deal, but she is completely blacklisted from the hospitality and PR industries globally. She is currently working as a cashier at a discount liquor store, scanning cheap $5 bottles of wine, knowing every single day that she held a $20 million masterpiece and willingly turned it into toxic sludge. Laurent is currently serving 7 years in a federal penitentiary, completely bankrupt, his wine empire reduced to a punchline. If there is a lesson to be learned here, it's this. A beautiful label means absolutely nothing if the chemistry inside the bottle is rotten. If your partner thinks they can use you as fertilizer, steal your genius, and leave you to wither in the dark while they cake the applause, don't panic. Don't fight them for the cellar. Smile, hand them the barrels, and let them confidently pour your creation in the brightest spotlight in the world. And right when they think they've won the toast, just wait for the air to hit it and watch the rot completely consume them. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what's the most satisfying public disaster you've ever witnessed? Stay sharp, trust the science, and always check the cork.